A change in QE? I don't think that will happen, but I do think the ECB will move the deposit rate in the March meeting. Josh Mahony from IG. Japan's economy has had a string of setbacks for the government's economic reform policy. So what is your assessment of the latest economic data?
Obviously not particularly positive data coming out of Japan. Of course, GDP reading very negative. We saw a quarterly reading of 0.4, minus 0.4. We also saw on an annualized basis the expectation of minus 1.4%. So obviously that's not particularly good. Consumer spending, one area that isn't particularly doing well. Exports also somewhat floundering, so that whole emerging markets demand story really isn't working out too well for Japan. We've also seen industrial production readings down minus 1.7. So, all in all, not particularly good readings for Japan. This comes after the fact that we actually see negative deposit rates from the Bank of Japan, and despite that, we saw the market selling off quite heavily from that. So I feel like we're actually getting to a place where the Bank of Japan can't actually do all too much more to stimulate their economy. Much of it really is going to be reliant on oil prices rising and hopefully the Chinese market actually starting to pick up so that they'll actually demand more of the Japanese product. But bearing in mind, of course, one of the sort of initial policies that we saw under Shinzo Abe was for them to devalue the yen, and now we've seen that happen, and we're seeing these figures come out in terms of GDP, and we've seen a negative deposit rate. The question is, where can they go from here? And I don't think they've necessarily got too much room for manoeuvre, so maybe they need to make up for it on the sort of fiscal policy side more than monetary policy side.
The economies of the 19 countries that use the euro expanded by 1.5% in 2015, which has led to suggestions that the ECB may need to stimulate economies in the euro area further still. Would you expect this to happen sooner rather than later?
I do think that they will move in March. I don't think that they're necessarily going to move as much as some people had expected. Now, not so long ago, everyone was saying that we're actually going to see further QE coming out of the ECB and the like. But ultimately, I don't think they're necessarily doing too bad. I don't think the GDP readings are particularly too bad. They're coming out of a very weak period, and therefore, it's going to take a bit of time for them to get going. The sort of main driver behind them actually making a move in terms of monetary policy, I believe, is going to be the fact that we've seen, perennially low inflation. But a lot of that is due to sort of external factors that they're not going to be able to influence through monetary policy, i.e. the price of oil and the like. It's obviously going to be worrying for them, the fact that we're seeing markets selling off and everyone's just starting to say the potential for a recession is here. But again, I don't think the monetary policy is really going to change all that much in terms of changing that right now. I do think that they're moving in a better direction. Unemployment's falling, GDP sort of fairly reasonable. We've seen not so long ago the PMI readings coming out of the area actually showed that the French, German and Eurozone, both manufacturing and services PMI, all of them are within expansionary territory, and it's always felt like there's been one area that's really floundering. It feels like they're all at least growing for the time being. And inflation's gradually starting to tick up somehow in the face of the fact that we've actually got such low oil prices. So I don't think they're necessarily as bad as some people would expect. People do have expectations in terms of a change in QE. I don't think that will happen, but I do think that they will move the deposit rate once more at the March meeting.
And lastly for today, which indicators will you be watching closely this week that have the potential to shape the markets?
I think that the interesting things for this week are, from a sort of economic announcement standpoint, it's going to be the UK as sort of the main thing to watch because of the fact that we've got the CPI reading coming out Tuesday, we've got the UK jobs report on Wednesday, and we've got the retail sales figures on Friday. Now, bearing in mind that we're hearing a lot of talk about potential for a recession and alike, and that really is just driven by the sort of big sharp sell-offs that we've been seeing from the equity markets. But when you look at what's happening from a sort of economic standpoint, I don't think there's really the basis for that. I don't think, the underlying economy looks like it's within any sort of mood to actually get into a recession. And the fact that we're seeing inflation, jobs numbers and retail sales really gives you a sort of wide reading in terms of the whole UK economy this week. So I think that's going to be interesting. I do think also that, I do think we're going to see the selling come back into play this week, despite the fact that I think we're going to have quite a positive start to the week. We've seen it today. I think we're likely to see another 1-2 more days in terms of upside, but I don't think the worst is over. I do think we could see further selling, and therefore you're going to be looking at gold, which has been a big performer recently. How is gold going to do? Is that going to start bouncing, to start moving back towards the upside? And the yen, which has been a major determinant in terms of the Nikkei and the whole sort of Asian markets of late. If we saw the yen starting to strengthen once more, then that means really that the risk-off sentiment's coming back into the markets, and we're likely to see the Asian selling. And when you see all the Asian markets selling off very heavily, and you come into your desk in Europe and you look at the screens and they're all in the red, it really sets up the day for another day of downside. So I think that the yen is going to be a really interesting one to watch too.
Thank you, Joshua. Be sure to check back to see how these market movers develop throughout the week. And of course, check back with Monica Gibson for our wrap-up on Friday. See you next time.